liftoff of Falcon 9. It is September 10th, just after 12:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and you are looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket with the Telstar 18 Vantage spacecraft on top, awaiting liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. Good evening from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name is John Innsbrucker. I'm the Falcon Principal Integration Engineer, and I'll be your host for tonight's webcast. Tonight we are launching the Telstar 18 Vantage spacecraft to a geostationary transfer orbit. Liftoff is planned for 12:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time or 04:45 Universal Time, coming up just some 12 minutes and 40 seconds from now. This will be SpaceX's 16th launch of this year, and today we will be flying a brand new Block 5 booster, which we will be attempting to land on our East Coast drone ship named, of course, I Still Love You. For today's mission, we're launching out of historic Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. This is one of SpaceX's 2 East Coast launch sites. On the pad, through a couple of drops of rain which have now left the area, you can see the 2-stage Falcon 9 vehicle, standing 70 meters tall, greater than the wingspan of a Boeing 747. The first stage is powered by 9 Merlin 1D engines, and they do the bulk of the work to carry Falcon 9 from the ground into the vacuum of space. First stage will separate about 67 kilometers up. Our second stage, which is visible on the webcast just above the black-colored interstage, has a single Merlin vacuum engine, which ignites after stage 1 separates. The second stage is what will carry Telstar 18 Vantage to geostationary transfer orbit, or GTO. It will take 2 burns of the upper stage engine to do that. The spacecraft is currently sitting inside of the 17-foot diameter payload fairing on top of the second stage. You can see the fairing with the customer's decals on it. About 30 seconds after ignition of the second stage, we will jettison the 2 fairing halves in the vacuum of space. Stage 2, still with Telstar 18V on top of it, will continue its journey into the first of 2 orbits planned for early this morning. Now, alongside of the Falcon 9, slightly obscuring the view, is the truss structure. We call it the Transporter Erector, or TE. That's what we use to roll the rocket out to the pad and support it in its vertical position, as you see on the screen now. The Transporter Erector also provides power, data, and air conditioning connections to the Falcon 9 rocket. Today's mission is the 5th flight of our Block 5 vehicle design. Block 5 represents a series of upgrades to Falcon 9 designed to allow us to reuse each Falcon 9 10 times or more, as well as reduce the refurbishment time needed between flights. T-minus 9 minutes and 37 seconds and counting. And as I like to say on the webcast, the good news is the SpaceX and spacecraft teams are working no significant issues right now. On the Falcon 9 side, the team came on console at T-minus 2 hours, gave their goes for launch, and we began propellant loading at T-minus 35 minutes. Currently, the second stage fuel tank is completely loaded. Meanwhile, first stage fuel is going on board, and we are loading liquid oxygen onto both the first and second stages. The liquid oxygen loading will end between T-minus 3 minutes and T-minus 2 minutes before launch. On the spacecraft side, the team is go for launch. We just heard that they have completed transfer of the spacecraft from ground power to the onboard batteries. That finished up at T-minus 15 minutes. There's no further commanding planned of the spacecraft before launch. They're ready to go. On the range side, we're flying out of the Air Force's Eastern Range. They have the airspace and the ocean areas clear for launch right now. They've also been giving us weather forecasts, releasing weather balloons. We've obviously been delayed early this morning for weather. We've been delayed 77 minutes. We've had rain, lightning, and thick clouds, but the weather officer says that's all clearing out right now, so the weather looks good for an on-time launch 45 minutes after the hour. Now, the launch window was 4 hours long. We've now got 2 hours and 43 minutes left in it when we get to T0. There is the possibility, if we hold in the last minutes of the count, we could try again tonight. That, of course, depends upon what caused us to hold the countdown and whether we can resolve it quickly. But if we are able to, we might have enough time to load another batch of cold liquid oxygen onto the Falcon 9 and try again later in the window. So in summary, Falcon 9's looking good. The spacecraft team's on internal power. They're ready to fly. The range says we're clear, and the weather appears to be cooperating for launch just over 7.5 minutes from now. Today, SpaceX is launching Telstar 18 Vantage, a powerful new satellite in the Telesat fleet that will enable communication services on the ground, in the air, and at sea. Built for Telesat by SSL, Telstar 18 Vantage will significantly expand Telesat's capacity over Asia, including growing markets in China, Mongolia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Ocean. Its high throughput capabilities will provide broad geographical coverage as well as focus coverage, which is important for bandwidth intensive applications like satellite TV. Telstar 18 Vantage is Telesat's second high throughput satellite to launch this summer in partnership with SSL and SpaceX. SSL, which is based in Palo Alto, California, builds both geostationary and low Earth orbit satellites, and to date has more commercial geostationary satellites on orbit than any other manufacturer. T-minus 5 minutes, 45 seconds. Everything continues to look good for launch of Falcon 9 with Telstar 18 Vantage. Now, during the discussion on the satellite, we heard the call out that MVAC Merlin engine chill-in has begun. That happens at T-minus 7 minutes. Another major activity that will be happening in less than a minute and a half at T-minus 4 minutes, 10 seconds, the cradle arms on the transport erector will open. So we might be able to get a close-up view of that. The arms will open, and the strong back will then recline slightly away from the Falcon 9, starting about 10 seconds after that. We'll hear the call out that the transport erector is in position at about 88.2 degrees. Once we get to T0, the erector is hydraulically reclined away from the Falcon 9 to about 77 degrees. Falcon 9 then clears the erector at liftoff. You've now heard the call out. The stages are pressing for strong back retract. That's getting ready to open the arms and recline the transport erector. Now, currently on Falcon 9, fuel is completely loaded on the first stage now. We're still loading liquid oxygen on the first and second stages. If we've got the pad mics up, you may be hearing the hiss and pop of pressure venting from the rocket, as well as the plumbing that's on the transport erector. The white clouds you see around the rocket, that's the moist Florida atmosphere. It's condensing around the areas where the cold gaseous oxygen is vented overboard. We've also got gaseous oxygen venting from the base of the Falcon 9. That's due to chilling in those Merlin turbopumps that began at T-minus 7 minutes. The liquid oxygen chills the pump on each engine, and then it's vented overboard. Now, once we finish loading liquid oxygen at T-minus 2 minutes, The last major event in the countdown will happen at T-1. That's when the flight computers on the Falcon 9 take control. You'll hear the countdown net. Falcon 9 is in startup. We've also heard just now that the recline is underway of the transport erector. And we've also heard TVC motions acceptable. That's the last minute wiggles of the upper stage engine actuators to make sure that everything has been checked out as close to launch as we can. Now, meanwhile, I was talking about Falcon 9 in startup at T-1 minutes. The computers will light the Merlin engines at about T-2 seconds, and liftoff will be commanded at T0. So with all systems go on Falcon 9, the spacecraft, the range, and the weather, let's listen to the last few minutes of the countdown.
Stage 1 logs are complete. Go bleed verification. Stage 2 lock slow complete. Falcon 9's on internal power.
Gas.
Falcon 9's in startup. Stage 2, press for flight.
Go for launch.
Stage 1's at startup pressures.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9's configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Clear for pitching downrange.
Power and telemetry are nominal.
47 seconds into flight, we just heard the tail end avionics call out nominal. Falcon 9 heading through the clouds at Cape Canaveral, powered on 1.7 million pounds of thrust, we're throttled down for passing through maximum dynamic pressure.
Vehicle supersonic.
We're supersonic, heading out of the Earth's atmosphere.
Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
And now the call out, we're through the area of maximum aerodynamic pressure. As we get into the thinner areas of Earth's atmosphere, the loads are now decreasing on the Falcon 9. Now we're getting ready for chill-in of the upper stage engine. Similar to the first stage, we'll begin flowing liquid oxygen to the pumps. And we've heard the call out, MVAC chill-in has begun. Now coming up, just past 2.5 minutes into flight, the 9 Merlin 1D engines you see here from the ground camera will shut down. A few seconds later, the stage will separate, and then the upper stage engine will ignite to begin propelling the spacecraft to the first of 2 orbits for the evening. 2 minutes, 8 seconds into flight, trajectory looks good. Merlin engine chamber pressures look good. Coming up on shutdown.
Maybe go.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And we've heard the call out, MVAC ignition. The chamber is up on power. Engine's looking good on stage 2. Meanwhile, stage 1 is now coasting. You can just see the grid fins, the titanium grid fins on the first stage opening on the left view. First stage is now going to begin drifting down towards the drone ship. Meanwhile, we're coming up in 15 seconds on fairing separation.
Stage 2 on nominal trajectory.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And a nice view, and you can hear the applause from the folks outside Mission Control here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The 2 fairing halves have separated in the vacuum of space. Now, as a reminder, on this flight, the fairings do not have recovery systems. We did not put parachutes in, so there's no plan to recover the fairings. We've heard acquisition of signal call out from Bermuda. That's our tracking site in Bermuda, has the telemetry from the Falcon 9. Second stage continues to perform well. We're carrying Telstar 18 Vantage to the low Earth parking orbit. We should get into orbit about 8.5 minutes into flight. Now currently, first stage continues to coast. It's arcing up to apogee and now beginning to descend down towards the drone ship. As a reminder, on this mission, it's a geostationary transfer orbit mission. There is no boost back burn to bring it back to Cape Canaveral for a land landing. This first stage recovery will use 2 burns to land on the drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean, currently parked about 635 kilometers offshore. This is the typical profile for a GTO mission. 5 minutes, 15 seconds into flight. The Merlin vacuum engine on stage 2 continues to look excellent. Trajectory is good, and we're waiting for entry burn of the first stage in less than a minute. Now we're coming up on T plus 6 minutes. Second stage continues to perform nominally. First stage is preparing for its entry burn coming up in about 17 seconds. This will be a 23-second burn. We light 3 engines on the first stage to begin slowing us down as we pass into the atmosphere.
Stage 1 entry startup.
You see ignition, the 3 Merlin engines at power, back illuminating those titanium grid fins.
Stage 1 entry shutdown.
And shutdown of stage 1. That completes the entry burn. Coming up at T+8 minutes, just shortly after that, we will get the landing burn of the first stage. Seven minutes into flight, everything continues to go well on the second stage. Propulsion's good, trajectory is good. We're about to go transonic on the first stage as it quickly enters the Earth's atmosphere. Time we should be going transonic on first stage. That puts us less than 60 seconds away from landing. Right now the vehicle is passing through 900 miles an hour. That'll give you an idea of the deceleration that's coming up in the span of less than a minute. Will reduce from over twice the speed of a jet all the way down to 0 as the rocket lands. There'll be many events coming up here very shortly. Landing burn and ignition, second stage goes into orbit, and then the first stage lands. Let's listen and watch.
AFTS has saved.
Stage 1 landing startup.
We have single engine startup on the first stage for landing. We're getting views from the onboard camera.
Vac shutdown.
Stage 1 landing light deploy.
And we're waiting for confirmation on first stage on the drone ship.
This is recovery. Falcon 9 has landed. All landing operators proceed to procedure 11.
We don't have a view, but we hear recovery calling out Falcon 9 has landed. Also importantly, in the background just now, we had second stage engine shutdown on time. Guidance, navigation, and control engineer confirms we have a nominal orbit. That's the parking orbit, the first of 2 planned. So far, first stage looks good on the drone ship. Second stage is in the desired parking orbit. Now our next events are restart of the upper stage engine at T+26 minutes 17 seconds, and then deployment of Telstar 18V almost 6 minutes later. So right now I'm going to pause live commentary, but I'll be back in about 15.5 minutes at T+25 minutes 30 seconds, and we'll bring you the restart of the upper stage engine, followed by deployment of the Telstar 18V satellite.
Lost a signal, Bermuda. Acquisition of signal, come on.
Welcome back. We're at T plus 25 minutes, 33 seconds since launch. Second stage has been coasting as it left the east coast of the US. It's now over Africa, crossing the equator, where we're going to complete the coast phase and reignite the second stage engine. This will happen in about 20 seconds. We plan on a 44-second burn to carry Telstar 18V from low Earth parking orbit to GTO. The engine's in startup.
And vac ignition.
We've heard the call out ignition. We're good power. Engine's in closed loop. This is a 44-second burn, as I said. Right now, we're running about 7.4 kilometers per second. This burn will increase the velocity of stage 2 carrying Telstar 18V to about 9.3 kilometers per second, transferring it to geostationary transfer orbit. We're now throttling down to limit Gs on the spacecraft.
Vac shutdown.
We've heard the call out for shutdown. Waiting for guidance to tell us how the orbit looks. Now, I've not heard the guidance engineer call out, but looking at data, the trajectory looks good.
Nominal orbital
So
insertion.
second stage has delivered Telstar 18V to a good orbit. We're in geostationary transfer orbit. Now, the next item on the primary mission agenda is deployment of the spacecraft itself. That's about 5 minutes from now. Now, we're going to continue to show you live views of the second stage, and I think we've got a view of the first stage on the drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. There it is on the left of your screen, the first stage on drone ship. Of course, I still love you. So we're going to pause live commentary for the moment. We'll be back to show the release of Telstar 18V in geostationary transfer orbit, coming back at about T plus 31 minutes and 30 seconds, or about 3 minutes from now.
Acquisition of signal, South Africa.
John Innsbrucker back at the SpaceX webcast desk in Hawthorne, California. The final event coming up, spacecraft deployment. It just passed 32 minutes into flight. Nice views from the second stage as we're on the daylight side of the Earth, passing over Africa, and you can see the altitude quickly increasing following that second burn of the upper stage engine. So now we're going to wait for the camera to switch forward and look for Telstar spacecraft separation.
Spacecraft separation confirmed.
And we've got nice views of the Telstar 18V separating. A great launch and deployment, and that's going to bring an end to our webcast. First stage liftoff. We had to wait about 77 minutes for the weather, but went right at T0 at the time that we replanned to. First stage landed successfully on the drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. Second stage performed 2 great burns, putting the Telstar satellite and the second stage in the desired geostationary transfer orbit. And then, as you just saw a moment ago, Telstar 18V deployed, pushed gently away from the second stage by some small springs on its way into its operational mission, raising itself up to the final orbit. With that, we'd like to thank our Telesat customer, SSL, the Air Force's 45th Space Wing for range support, and our licensing agency, the Federal Aviation Administration. We invite you to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and of course on our webpage at spacex.com. I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening for SpaceX's 60th completed Falcon 9 mission.